Gang, I have a particular bone to pick with shin splints, especially because it's one of the first injuries I ever got, and it knocked me out of the first ever Boston Marathon I ever qualified for. And the real kicker is that it's a perfectly preventable running injury. There are things that we can do that I'll talk about in this video that you can 100% use to control your own destiny. But before we get into that, what are shin splints at all? Well, they usually present as pain in this medial front of your shin. And it's called medial tibial stress syndrome, where often it's some combination of either stress of the bone or some of the muscles and tendons around it because of all of this increased impact. Just like a lot of beginner runners who experience shin splints, I was increasing my volume a little bit. I was increasing my intensity a little bit. I wasn't very good with my strength training and even my running form. So I was setting myself up for this worst case scenario of factors to congeal together into this. And at first the symptoms present themselves pretty mildly. You know, as runners, we're used to running through some sort of suffering and pain. Early on, I struggled between figuring out, hey, what's good suffering and what's bad. We've done videos on that. But this started to present in a tingly sort of way. Then all of a sudden it would stick around a little bit and be a little bit more noticeable. And I kept trying to run through it. I kept trying to rest. And eventually it just became so painful that I would feel it walking around. And that's when I had to pull the plug on the marathon, which was real shame. As I said in the beginning of this video, if I knew then what I know now and what I'm about to share with you, I would not have had to skip the Boston Marathon at all. So first step towards staying on track is going to be removing irritation altogether. Now imagine going to a doctor and you say, hey doc, every time I run, I experience some pain in my shins. It might be very reasonable for them to say, hey, why don't you just stop running, stop removing the things that is causing the irritation as a solution. And honestly, it is a good solution. It just might not be a helpful one for you. So rather than think about stopping running altogether, we want to think about shifting gears. If I need to put running on the back shelf for a moment, because we're gonna get back to it, right? We're not cutting out running altogether. Just for a moment, we can think about how we can cross-train to continue to build up our cardiovascular fitness and just build a stronger body so that when we heal this injury, we come back really not having missed much whatsoever. So the first thing we need to do this is that we can't blunt any of the signals that our body is sending us from a pain perspective, which means we can't blunt ourselves with ice, because ice actually doesn't really help us heal, it just numbs things. And we can't blunt ourselves with Advil or any type of painkillers. And if we remove these two things, we can stay very tuned in to what feels good on our body and what continues to aggravate our body. Now, if you've caught your shin splints at a very, very early stage, you may find that you could probably do anything from a cross-training perspective. You could get on a Stairmaster, you could do a hard bike or spin class, you could swim, you could water run, you could get on a rower. For those of you who've let the shin splints go a little bit longer, you're gonna find that there might be some forms of cross-training that feel okay and others that don't feel very good. So just because you're cross-training, again, I wanna listen to the signals that my body's sending me and not cause further irritation. That's like the cardinal rule number one. However, if you can kind of manage these things, you can still keep your cross-training pretty high and pretty vigorous. And what I encourage you to do is keep the spirit of the training plan or routine that you're currently on. That means that if you're doing hill intervals or high intensity intervals, on the run one day, hey, can I do that water running? Can I do that on an exercise bike? Again, provided it doesn't further irritate me. If I can kind of keep the spirit and the letter of my training just by switching up the modality, that can really help me out. Now, in the next piece, what I'm going to talk about is how to actually further expedite your healing with a lot of self-care, massage, and mobility work. So the first thing you need to do is get your hands on your legs, applying a little bit of pressure and seeing where things feel tight and potentially painful and where things are good. And a general good rule of thumb for tissue health is that if my tissue is happy, healthy, and normal, I could apply a lot of pressure in a spot and I should feel the pressure, but I shouldn't feel pain. Now, for some of you, you might be looking at this and wincing because if your shin splints have gone so far, you know how tender and painful it is. That's just a confirming sign that we've let this thing go a little long, and now we need to be more aggressive in all of our interventions. And then there are gonna be some of you, hey, you know what, it's a little tender, but it's not too bad. That's kind of the nice spot where I've caught the issue early. So we're gonna work on basically two specific areas of our shin. We're gonna work on the medial aspect in here, working on this posterior tib muscle just along the inside of my shin. One of my favorite ways to do this, guys, it's a little gross, but you know, do it when no one's looking. You just lick your thumb a little bit, get a little saliva in there, and then I'm just gonna add a little pressure. I'm on the shin bone here, on the tib, and I'm just gonna slide right into that soft tissue, and I'm just gonna run my thumb all the way down here. Now you may find that it's only one spot that's tight, or it's gotten a little bit bigger, but this gives me a really good feel of what's going on. The thing I can also use are some lacrosse balls, where I can actually get into my posterior tib and this outside part of my shin, this anterior tibialis, and I can do a little calf sandwich where I find some tight spots. I can flex and extend this ankle back and forth. Nora's flexing and extending her nose. She's sniffing things out. And again, I can find some tight areas. I can work through here. This is such a key thing for getting blood flow here, loosening up our tight, stiff calves just from doing a lot of running, and for helping ourselves out. In a more broader brush, I want to go beyond just the specific area that's more painful into this whole broader area. So I better believe that if I'm dealing with a little pain here, it might be these guys and even these guys that are a little bit stiff as well. So I could get into some broader calf rolling, working through my calf. And this is helpful, guys, because you're actually rolling on an area where it's like, well, wait, why am I spending time in an area that doesn't really have the pain? It's like, well, all of this is connected in some way. So I could start to roll through my calves, and then I could flip this over and work on my shins. And I could just start to roll through here, back and forth. Again, just as a nice way to really address a lot of my lower legs. And even if you don't have shin splints, guys, you've been running a lot, this feels really, really good, and it's really, really necessary. Now, more broadly, I want to talk about the health of your foot and the range of motion of your ankle. Now, too often shoes these days are decently narrow, and they push our feet together. And when my toes get jammed up, they don't do as good a job of absorbing force and impact that it's supposed to do. I want a shoe that allows these toes to spread out. Every time I hit the ground, there's that little splay, and then my arch can actually do the job of absorbing every impact. If I'm a little bit locked up, this whole system gets rigid, and guess where that force goes? Well, it goes somewhere that is not designed to maintain that force, like boom, further up. The other thing I want to talk about is our ankle. You better believe that if I'm lacking range of motion in this ankle, if I don't have this ability to sit down all the way in a low squat with my heels flat on the ground, maybe extend to one leg to sit here, I know that I'm lacking this general range of motion. And if my ankle is stiffer, guess what? I have to work harder to just drag that ankle around, right? My shin outside has to drag this up, my calves have to drag this down back and forth, which is just further causing and contributing to this overworking situation. So now that we have our mobility and soft tissue work under control, we're thinking about tackling this 5 to 10 minutes every single day where you're working on some aspect of your shin. Remember, if this is a hot poker and this doesn't wanna, it's gotten enough love for the day, don't keep poking something that's irritated. Spread the love around to different areas that will also be of value. We need to start strengthening our lower legs and our feet. Now, oftentimes we find ourselves here because we have introduced running or some sort of new stimulus in, and our body is not quite strong or adapted enough to fully handle it. So one of the most powerful ways to make changes and to strengthen your feet and your ankles is to introduce things into your day-to-day lifestyle that just ask more of your feet and ankles. So can you spend more time barefoot, walking around the house or maybe even your office? Can you get into a lower, more minimal shoe where just by walking around, all of a sudden my feet aren't in these lovely cushioned supportive pillows anymore, and they actually have to work. So that's just a great kind of base note that I can hit all the way through. There is a serious caveat to this, and that is for those of you whose shin splints are really, really bad, you may find that it's irritating even to walk around barefoot. And of course, if you're in that situation, chances are you're working with the PT. They're giving you some extra guidance on, you know what, you need to be in a more supportive shoe for the short term because we need to fan the flames down. So this works if you're someone who's not that irritated. Again, it's not painful, it's not causing things or making things worse. I can start to do it a little bit. The next thing we can start to think about is just how to give our feet and our ankles a little bit of extra accessory work. How do I strengthen the feet, the ankles, the arch? How do I get all the shin muscles going and the calves a little bit stronger? It could start with something as simple as some calf raises, where I'm just working on going up on 2 feet, coming back down. And this is like a nice place to start, because if I'm dealing with a fresher injury, this is low impact, it doesn't cause too much crazy load. And pretty soon what I could do is I could work up on 2 and I could work on the eccentric coming down on 1. And then pretty soon I could work on going up on 1 and back down on 1 all the way. I could even bring this to like a stair where I'm all of a sudden dropping my heel even lower to get a little bit of work there. Another thing I love to do, again, this is really no like low level impact, doesn't really cause too much of an advanced load, would just be to work on some foot strength by grabbing a towel and starting to use your toes to pull this towel inward. This is a great way of just strengthening the feet and the arch, getting a little blood flow there, and you can even see that all these muscles are flexing as I do this as well. So with things like my calf raises and with this, I could work on 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps where I'm going to some degree of exhaustion, let myself rest again and do it again. And if I can do that, I could do those exercises almost every single day initially without necessarily causing too much. Once I'm ready for more advanced stuff, I feel like I'm turning the corner, things are starting to get a little bit better, I can start to prep myself for running with a little bit more impact. And there's really a few great ways to do that. One would be some line jumps where I'm gonna either go on 2 feet, jump over line and back, and I could work on just a little bit of hopping back and forth. I could do a little bit of lateral hopping back and forth. Hey, does this feel good on 2 feet? Am I getting that load and that spring? Now can I do this on 1 foot? Where I'm gonna hop forward once, hop once back, and now all of a sudden I'm starting to introduce that running load. Hey, what is it like to land on 1 foot? Can I be stable? Is anything collapsing in? Can I land nice and level there? And then can I work on even some side to side? Again, same thing. Can I work on 3 sets, 10 to 15 reps? I'm kind of keeping the sets and reps pretty simple for you guys because we're just trying to get that regular load there. Then could I progress it even to some single leg jump roping where I just, imagine I've got my jump rope here, I'm just working on accumulating 30 seconds, 45 seconds, or a minute. All really excellent supplemental work, get my calves, my shins, my feet stronger. By now we've done all this stuff, we're actually ready to start reintroducing running back into the situation, so let's talk about that next. Now let's talk about your run form and mechanics. It's really helpful to think that this injury didn't necessarily come out of nowhere. It didn't come just because of volume or intensity. It became because that volume and intensity exposed something about you. And here's where the opportunity in injuries lie. If you can use this as the opportunity to really strengthen and improve how you move, you not only come out healthier, but you actually come out running more efficiently and faster for those runs. So that's really the hope. Now, rising tide raises all ships when it comes to run form. The more aligned I can get you running, the better cadence, the more relaxed, the more those feet are landing underneath you. That's gonna help all matter of running injuries, from issues to your feet, your shins, your knees, your IT band, etc. But specifically, let's hit a few details for your shins. Now, the biggest thing that I want to pay attention to with a runner who's dealing with shin splints is how their feet sound when they hit the ground. If I hear any type of slapping, every time this foot comes to the ground, I hear the slapping motion, I can tell that these guys are doing a little bit more work than they're designed to do. And usually what I'm starting to see is that as a runner, I am not relaxed in the right areas. I'm not relaxed in my shoulders. And because I'm not relaxed in all my shoulders, I'm not as relaxed as I could be in the ankle. So if I'm stiff here, this ankle's stiff, and then every time this leg swings through, this whole musculature here has to control and prevent from my foot from totally slapping the ground with every single stride. That starts to fatigue. There's a lot of extra work and impact there. Much better if I can learn how to stay relaxed and tall here. Notice I've said that a few times, so that every time I pick this foot up, this foot is nice and loose. So every time this foot hits the ground, it engages, it's nice and loose again. Tight, nice and loose. If you ever watch sprinters run, say in the Olympics, you'll notice that how relaxed their jaws are when they're running, because they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to be tight and engaged in the right places and relaxed in the right places. So a good drill for you is just to think about this ankling. Can I pick my feet up here, nice and loose? Can I just even bounce up and down, keeping those ankles nice and loose as well? And then can I just pay attention to the sound of my feet when I run? If they start to get loud, I need to shorten my runs for the moment and try to make a big change. You'll notice that there's going to be a correlation here between this foot slapping and this longer stride, which is sometimes associated with lower cadence. So count your cadence. If you're noticing those numbers are on the low end, try to shorten that stride up, pick those feet up underneath you. That will help you out. A few other things. You may find that you're doing all the strength, you're doing all this mobility work, you're working on your run form. Your feet are still adapting. And guys, this takes time, this is process, this is lifestyle. So in the short term, you may find that your body responds well to a shoe that is a little bit more supportive. So we did talk about getting into more minimal shoes a lot, but that doesn't mean when you're running that you don't give yourself to the support you need, provided you have the exit strategy or working on these other things to make yourself a little bit stronger. My final tip for you, or at least on just the run specific part, is to make sure you have an exit strategy when you go out and run. The biggest mistake is you've taken this long layoff, you're really excited to run, you go out for 5 miles, and you're 3 miles out on the run, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, my shins are really bothering me. There's nothing worse than finishing a run knowing that you're doing further damage to your shins and further delaying your return. It's much better to do short runs, say go to a track. Can I run 400 meters? Could I run 800 meters? Could I just do these little short breaks, or a little lap around your neighborhood where all of a sudden if I feel good, I can keep going. If I don't feel good, I can cut things back anytime I want. Every time I finish a run, I feel like I should be able to do more, and that makes sure that I stay on the healthy side of things. If I can couch my running with a really good strength training program and some good cross training, there's no reason that I could use this injury and get out of shape at all. In fact, I can use this injury to get stronger than I've ever been, more fit than I've ever been, and I come back to running without skipping a beat. Now, we're just scratching the surface on all the types of running injuries that afflict us as runners. If you want more help on strength, mobility, and movement, all the things you can do to prevent running injuries for yourself, I've made this handy dandy playlist. You can go ahead and click it right in this video. Gang, I have a bone to tick. Now, one of the most powerful, nope.